The rain found me first. Not the sight of it, but the smell. Wet pine and rotting leaves, that sharp autumn scent that gets inside your lungs and stays there like a memory you can't shake. Then the cold, seeping through my wool cloak, through my leather boots, through skin and muscle until I couldn't remember what warmth felt like. My fingers had gone numb an hour ago, maybe 2. Time had become meaningless on the mountain path, measured only in steps and the growing ache in my legs. The wind came last, howling down from the peaks like something alive and angry, pushing me forward even when my legs wanted to stop, when every rational thought told me to find shelter, anything to wait out the storm. The mountains offered nothing, just endless slopes of pine and rock, the path disappearing under running water and copper leaves that had fallen in the dying days of autumn, turning the trail into a treacherous river of mud and debris. The cabin appeared through the sheets of rain like a ghost materializing from gray nothing. Rough timber darkened by weather and age, a chimney breathing thin smoke into the storm, windows glowing faintly with the promise of firelight. I didn't think about who might be inside. I didn't care. I just moved toward it, my fingers too numb to knock properly, fumbling at the rough wood. The door opened before I could touch it. He stood in the threshold, and I smelled him before I truly saw him. Smoke and cedar, something darker underneath, like turned earth after the first frost, blood, old and faint, woven into the fabric of whatever he wore. The scent hit me with unexpected force, familiar in a way that made absolutely no sense, and for a moment I forgot about the cold, about the rain, about everything except that strange recognition blooming in my chest like something I'd been waiting for without knowing it. My eyes adjusted slowly to the firelight behind him, and then I understood. He was covered in wolf pelts layered over his shoulders and chest, the fur still thick and pale even in the dim light. They weren't decorative. They were practical, worn with use, and they made him look half wild, something caught between man and beast, between civilization and the mountain wilderness. He didn't speak. His eyes moved over me, gray as river stones smoothed by cold water, assessing me with a gaze that held no warmth but also no threat. Taking in my soaked cloak, my mud-caked boots, my copper-red hair plastered to my skull. I must have looked half-drowned, pathetic, but his expression didn't change. He just stepped aside, a silent invitation. I crossed the threshold and felt the heat from the hearth like a physical thing, almost painful against my frozen skin. The cabin was small. One room, a stone fireplace taking up most of the far wall, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves holding clay jars and dried herbs that hung in bundles from the low rafters, and a single bed pushed against the wall near the fire. Furs and blankets piled on it, the same pale pelts he wore draped everywhere like the shed skins of winter itself. The smell inside was overwhelming. Smoke and meat and cured leather, pine resin and something wild that I couldn't name, something that made my pulse quicken. He moved past me without a word, pulled a piece of wood from the stack beside the fire and fed the flames. They leapt higher, casting dancing shadows across the walls. I stood there dripping onto his floor, creating a puddle that spread across the packed earth, waiting for him to tell me to leave, to demand payment, to ask questions I didn't want to answer. Instead, he pointed to the bed. I looked at him, then at the bed, then back at him. His face was difficult to read, all sharp planes and shadows cast by the firelight, but I saw the scars then, deliberate marks across his cheekbones, thin lines that curved down from his temples like ritual cuts I'd seen on the shamans in the lowland villages. More scars on his hands, his forearms, disappearing under the pelts and the rough linen shirt beneath. Not the scars of battle, ragged and random. The scars of ceremony, precise and intentional. "The storm won't pass tonight," he said. His voice was low, rough from disuse. "Maybe not tomorrow either. Could be 3 days." I nodded, teeth chattering. There's only the one bed. You take the side near the fire, I'll take the other. We share the blankets, or we both freeze. It should have frightened me, but I was too cold to be afraid, and something in his tone, matter of fact, without threat, made me believe him. I peeled off my wet cloak and hung it by the fire. He turned his back while I removed my boots. When I climbed onto the bed, the furs were impossibly soft and warm. I pulled a blanket over myself and closed my eyes, listening to the storm rage outside. Exhaustion pulled me down into darkness. When I woke, it was still night, and he was beside me. Not touching, but close enough that I felt his heat. Smelled that combination of smoke and earth and old blood. The fire had burned low, and shadows moved with the wind. That's when I smelled something else. Pine resin, sharp and fresh. Wet fur, but different, cleaner, wilder. And underneath, something I had no words for. Musk and moonlight and ancient forest floor. It wasn't coming from him. It came from outside, but it filled the cabin like an invisible presence. I turned my head and saw his eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. His jaw was tight. "Do you smell that?" I whispered. A long silence, then barely audible. "Yes." "What is it?" "Go back to sleep." But I couldn't. The smell grew stronger, and with it came sounds, something moving outside, something large. Padding steps, deliberate and slow, circling the cabin. Once, twice, 3 times, always the same pattern. I sat up, heart hammering. He remained motionless. "There's something out there," I said. "I know." "Aren't you going to—" "No." He finally looked at me, gray eyes glowing faintly. "Whatever it is, it won't come inside. Not tonight." "How do you know?" "Because it's not here for that." I heard the fear beneath his voice. Instead of demanding answers, I lay back down and listened. Deep breathing came next, just beyond the walls. It circled 3 times before fading into the storm's roar. The next morning, rain had softened to drizzle, but the wind was still too fierce. I woke alone. He was at the table, sharpening a long knife. A pot hung over the fire, smelling of sage and venison. I went to the door, needing daylight. When I opened it, I saw the tracks. Paw prints, massive and perfectly formed, pressed deep into the mud. They circled the cabin, 3 complete loops, then vanished into the trees. But these weren't any wolf I'd ever seen. Too large, too deliberate. And where the mud was disturbed, it had frozen, the edges crystalline and white. "Close the door," he said behind me. I obeyed, heart racing. "What made those tracks?" "You should eat." "I'm not hungry. I want to know—" "You want to know things that have no easy answers." He set the blade down and met my eyes. "Why you're here, in this cabin with me. Why the storm came when it did. Why you could smell what you smelled last night." I swallowed. "Yes." "I can't. Not yet." He moved to the pot, ladling something into a bowl. "But eat, because you'll need your strength, and stay away from the door after dark. Don't open it, no matter what you hear." He handed me the bowl. Our fingers brushed, and that scent hit me again. Earth and smoke and blood. But I realized it was mutual. His nostrils flared, something passing across his face. Recognition. Fear. He stepped back quickly. "What's your name?" I asked. "Names don't matter here." "They matter to me." He hesitated. "Kyle. They call me the king in the villages below, but it's a title, not a name. I'm no one's ruler." "Why do they call you that?" "Because I keep the boundary, and because they're afraid of what I am." "What are you?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Eat your food. The storm won't break today either." He was right. The second day was worse. The wind became a living thing, tearing at the roof, making the walls groan. We barely spoke. I mended my cloak. He worked on something with leather strips and bone. We moved around each other carefully, orbiting, pulled by something neither understood. The smell returned at nightfall, stronger. Pine and musk and that wild ancient scent. This time I heard more. Breathing, deep and measured, just outside. And once, a sound neither growl nor howl, but something between. Cale sat on the bed, knife across his knees. We stayed awake together, listening, as whatever circled made its presence known. 3 times around, then silence. "It's waiting for something," I said. "Yes. For what?" "For us to understand." "Understand what?" He turned his head toward me, and in the dying firelight, his face was half shadow, half light. "Why we're both here, together. Why you smell like autumn earth and amber. Why I recognized you even though we've never met." "I don't understand." "Neither do I," he admitted. "Not yet." The 3rd day, the rain stopped, but the sky remained heavy and gray. I stepped outside while Kyle checked the chimney, needing air. The forest was silent. No birds, no animals. Just dripping water and my breathing. I found the white fur caught on a bramble bush near the tree line. It was thick and soft, the color of fresh snow. And when I touched it, that scent rolled over me so powerfully I nearly staggered. With it came an impression of vast spaces, of running through moonlit forests, of freedom beyond human understanding. I brought it back. Cale was inside, and when I held up the fur, his face went pale. "Where did you find that?" "In the bushes. What is it?" He took it carefully. "This shouldn't be here. Not yet." "Kyle, you need to tell me what's happening." He sat down heavily, and for the first time I saw him truly shaken. "There's a story. An old story. Older than the villages. The elders used to tell it before they marked me and sent me up here." I sat across from him. "Tell me." He was silent, turning the white fur over in his scarred hands. Then, "They say that once every 100 years, 2 people will meet in the mountains during the autumn storms. 2 people who carry the scent of the old world in their blood, earth and wolf and ancient things. When they meet, when they share shelter, the boundary between this world and the spirit world thins, and the guardian comes." "The guardian?" "A white wolf. Not flesh and blood, but something older. A spirit beast that walks between the living and the dead, that keeps the balance. It comes when it's called, even if the calling isn't deliberate." He looked at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name. "It's called by scent, by recognition, by 2 souls the old world marked long before they were born." My mouth was dry. "You think that's what's been circling the cabin?" "I know it is. That's why I was sent here, why I've lived in this cabin for 15 years. But I didn't expect you." "What about me?" "Because you smell like autumn earth and amber," he said softly. "Because when I caught your scent that first night, something in me knew you. It was like remembering a dream, and you felt it too." I couldn't deny it. From the moment I'd stepped inside, there had been something, a pull, a recognition deeper than sight or sound. "What does it want?" I asked. "The prophecy says it needs a witness and a bearer, one to carry the mark, one to remember. When the guardian appears, it will choose which of us will be bound to it, walk between the worlds, keep the balance, and which will have to let go. Watch it happen. Remember what was lost." That night, the storm returned with violence that made the previous days seem gentle. The wind screamed, rain hammered the roof, thunder rolled through the mountains. Cale built up the fire, and we sat together on the bed waiting. The smell came first, so strong now it was almost visible. Pine and musk and wild places, filling every corner. Then the breathing, loud enough to hear over the storm. And finally, the howl. It was deeper than any wolf I'd ever heard, resonant, a sound that vibrated in my chest and made my bones ache. It came from directly outside, and with it came light, cold and white and ethereal, seeping through the cracks in the wood. Kyle stood. I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I whispered. "I have to. This is why I'm here. Why I've always been here." He walked to the door and opened it. The white wolf stood in the clearing, and it was impossibly huge, easily the size of a horse, maybe larger. Its fur glowed with that same ethereal light I'd seen seeping through the door, illuminating the rain and the trees and the ground beneath its massive paws. Each strand of fur seemed to hold moonlight, to radiate something that wasn't quite of this world. Its eyes were amber, the exact shade of my own eyes, like polished stones or honey held up to the sun. And when it looked at me, I felt something crack open inside my chest, like ice breaking on a frozen river. Kale stepped outside into the rain, and I followed without thinking, without choosing, my body moving on instinct older than reason. The wolf watched us both, its gaze moving between us, weighing something I couldn't articulate. Then it moved, not toward Kale, but toward me. Each step was deliberate, measured, the kind of movement that suggested consciousness and purpose beyond what any animal should possess. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there as it came close enough that I could feel the heat of it, smell the forest and stars and ancient earth that clung to its glowing fur. It lowered its massive head and pressed its nose against my chest, just over my heart. The world tilted and fell away. I saw things I shouldn't have been able to see, memories that weren't mine, stretching back through years, through decades, through generations that blurred together like water flowing over stones. Women with my face, my eyes, my copper-red hair, walking these same mountains in different clothes, different seasons, different centuries. Men with Kale's scars, his gray eyes, his ritual marks, keeping the boundary in times when the world was younger, when the old ways were still remembered and honored. A pattern endlessly repeating like a wheel turning through time, each pair meeting in storm and fire and autumn rain, each pair marked by the guardian in this exact clearing, under these same ancient pines. But it wasn't fate. That's what I understood as the visions flooded through me like a river breaking through a dam. It was choice. Every single one of them had chosen to step out into the storm when they could have stayed inside, safe and warm. Every single one had chosen to face the guardian when they could have fled down the mountain. Every single one had chosen to accept the mark and everything that came with it, had chosen to let go of what they'd been before and become something new, something necessary. When I came back to myself, I was on my knees in the mud, rain streaming down my face, and the wolf was gone. Kyle knelt beside me, and I saw the mark on my chest through my torn shirt, a white print, exactly the shape of the wolf's nose, glowing faintly before it faded to a silvery scar. "You're the bearer," he said, his voice thick. "And you're the witness," I whispered. "You'll remember this. You'll keep the boundary. You'll tell the story to whoever comes next. But I'll carry the guardian's protection. Walk between the worlds when the boundary thins. Keep the balance. Feel when things slip out of alignment. Know when the dead grow restless." He helped me stand, and the rain was already easing, clouds tearing open to reveal stars. The prophecy was never about binding us together. It was about freeing us to become what we were always meant to be. "Will I see you again?" He looked at me for a long moment, rain streaming down his face. "Every 100 years, maybe, when the storms come and the boundary thins. We're part of the cycle now. I'll witness the next bearer, and someday, someone will witness after me. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." By morning, the sky had cleared completely. The mountain path was passable. I gathered my things, moving slowly because I didn't want to leave. Kyle walked me to the edge of the clearing. We didn't touch. We didn't say goodbye. I just looked back once, saw him standing there in his wolf pelts, gray eyes watching, one hand raised. Then I continued down the mountain, and with each step the mark on my chest grew warmer, pulsing with my heartbeat. But I carried the scent of him with me, smoke and earth and old blood. A reminder of 3 days in a cabin during a storm, of a choice made in rain and lightning, of a white wolf that walked between worlds. A year passed. Autumn came again, the leaves turning copper and gold, the air growing sharp with frost that burned the lungs on cold mornings. I'd traveled far, seen strange things, felt the guardian's mark on my chest grow warm when the boundary between worlds grew thin. In graveyards at midnight where spirits walked between the stones, in old forests where no paths ran and the trees remembered older names, in mountain passes where the wind carried voices of the dead, and I could hear them as clearly as I heard my own thoughts. I'd learned what it meant to be a bearer, to walk the line between the living and the spirit realm, to keep the balance as those who came before me had done for countless generations, each one carrying the weight alone until the cycle turned again. And when the first autumn storm rolled across the mountains, bringing with it the scent of pine and rain and wild places, I found myself climbing the path again, not because I had to, not because the mark compelled me, but because I chose to, because I wanted to. The cabin was still there, smoke rising from the chimney in a thin gray line against the darkening sky. The door opened before I could knock, and Cale stood in the threshold, exactly as he had a year ago. Wolf pelts over his shoulders, gray eyes watching, those ritual scars stark against his weathered skin. But this time, when I met his eyes, I understood what the scent meant. Recognition. Not of strangers forced together by storm and prophecy, not of two people caught in something beyond their control, but of two souls who had chosen their path, who had stepped into the rain and faced the guardian and emerged transformed. Two halves of the same cycle, witness and bearer, memory and action, forever bound by the choice we'd made and the mark we carried. He stepped aside, and I crossed the threshold into warmth and firelight. "The storm's coming," he said. "I know. That's why I'm here." "The guardian won't come tonight. It already made its choice. Now we make ours." Outside, the wind began to rise, carrying the scent of pine and rain and wild places. But inside the cabin, beside the fire, there was only warmth and the quiet knowledge that some prophecies aren't about fate at all. They're about finding your way home. The white wolf's howl echoed somewhere in the distant peaks, a blessing and a farewell, and I knew that when morning came, Cale and I would still be here, witnesses and bearers both, bound not by destiny, but by the choice we made when we stepped out into the storm and let the old world mark us as its own. The cycle had turned, and it would turn again, 100 years from now, with different faces and the same ancient dance. But tonight we had this, shelter and fire and the scent of recognition between us, smoke and earth and amber, wolf and boundary and balance. And that was enough. That was everything.